October 24th, 1942. A humid darkness has fallen over the island of Guadalcanal, a place that feels less like solid ground and more like a fever dream. The air, thick enough to drink, carries the scent of rotting vegetation, rotting flesh, the metallic tang of rotting hope. Here, in a narrow sector of the Lunga perimeter, Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone of the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines stares into a blackness so complete it seems to swallow sound. The jungle is a solid wall of impenetrable shadow, a place that has ceased to be neutral territory. Tonight, it belongs to the enemy. For weeks, the men have existed on a knife's edge. Sleep comes in shallow, fitful bursts, punctuated by the whine of mosquitoes and the distant crump of mortars. Malaria and dysentery have ravaged the battalion, leaving the survivors gaunt, with yellowed skin and haunted eyes. They are ghosts defending a ghost-haunted island. Basilone, a man forged in the crucible of the old Marine Corps, feels the tension coiling in his gut. It's a familiar feeling, but here it's different. It's primal. He can feel the jungle watching him. His 2 heavy machine gun sections, 15 men in total, are dug into a soggy ravine that forms a shallow saddle in the American line. It is a weak point, a natural corridor for an attack, and everyone knows it. His men call him Manila John from his pre-war service in the Philippines. He is a bull of a man, solid and steady, the kind of non-commissioned officer who inspires calm not through speeches but through quiet competence. He moves down the line now, his boots sinking into the thick, sucking mud. He checks on his gun crews, his voice a low rumble beneath the cacophony of insects. Private First Class Nash Phillips, a skinny kid from North Carolina, gives him a weary grin from behind a water-cooled M1917 Browning. The weapon is a beast, heavy and reliable, but it requires constant care. Basilone taps the cooling jacket. "Keep her wet, Phillips. Don't let her run dry." The night is unnervingly quiet, and then, suddenly, it's not. The usual symphony of the jungle, the chirps, the calls, the rustling of unseen things, begins to fade. It is a slow, creeping silence that is more terrifying than any noise. It's as if the jungle itself is holding its breath. The Marines grip their rifles tighter. Fingers trace the triggers of the heavy Brownings. Every man is listening, straining to hear something beyond the frantic beating of his own heart. You can feel it in the air, a pressure building, like the stillness before a lightning strike. The humidity seems to increase, sweat stinging your eyes, pasting your worn-out herringbone twill uniform to your skin. Then a new sound begins. It is subtle at first, a low, rhythmic murmur carried on the heavy air. It's not an animal. It's not the wind. It sounds almost human, a chant. It grows, layer upon layer of voices joining from the suffocating darkness, a sound that seems to come from the very earth itself. It is a sound of absolute, unified purpose. Flares hiss into the sky, sputtering magnesium that casts a ghastly, flickering light over the terrain. For a heart-stopping second, the jungle is illuminated, and it is full of men, hundreds of them. Soldiers of the Japanese Sendai Division, rising from the kunai grass like specters, their bayonets catching the dying flare light like a forest of silver needles. They are a solid mass of humanity, a living tide about to break upon the American line. The murmur swells into a full-throated roar, a single, terrifying phrase that will be seared into the memory of every man who survives this night. The sound hits the Marine line like a physical blow. Tenno Heika Banzai! For the Emperor, 10,000 years of life. It is not a battle cry. It is a promise of death. Theirs and yours. The world dissolves into a maelstrom of light and noise. Japanese knee mortars begin to thud, their shells arcing high into the night, followed by the deafening crack of explosions that tear through the American positions. Geysers of mud, shrapnel, and vegetation erupt all along the perimeter. The ground heaves. Men scream. The air fills with the acrid stench of cordite, hot metal, and churned earth. Before the echoes of the first mortar shells have faded, the human wave is in motion. 300 soldiers of the Imperial Japanese Army surge forward, a charging wall of khaki and steel. They are not running in a disorganized mob. They move with a terrifying, synchronized discipline, a single organism driven by a single will. They pour into the saddle of the ravine, directly toward Basilon's machine gun pits. This is the moment the Browning M1917 was built for. Open fire! The order is almost lost in the din, but the guns don't need it. They erupt in a deafening staccato roar, a torrent of .30 caliber rounds scything into the night. The heavy guns buck and shake on their tripods, spitting streams of tracer rounds that create eerie red lines in the darkness, connecting the gunners to the charging enemy. For a moment, the charge seems to falter. The front ranks of the Japanese assault are shredded, men pitching forward into the mud, their bodies torn apart by the relentless fire. But for every soldier who falls, 2 more seem to take his place, climbing over the bodies of their comrades, their bayonets held high, their screams unceasing. They are a force of nature, an avalanche that cannot be stopped, only endured. Grenades begin to rain down on the Marine positions. They are small, percussive explosions that blast eardrums and send razor-sharp fragments whining through the air. A grenade lands directly in the gun pit to Basilon's left. The flash is blinding, the explosion a gut-punching thud. The Browning on that side goes silent. Chaos engulfs Basilon's section. He sees men from the rifle pits being overrun, caught in desperate hand-to-hand struggles in the mud. A Marine goes down, a bayonet in his chest. Another swings his rifle like a club. The perimeter is dissolving into a series of isolated, brutal fights. Basilon's world shrinks to the 20 yards of mud and death in front of him. He turns to check on his remaining gun, manned by PFC Phillips and 2 other Marines. As he does, a Japanese mortar round lands just behind their pit. The explosion throws him off his feet. His ears ring with a high-pitched whine. Shaking his head to clear the concussion, he scrambles back to the gun. Phillips is alive, dazed but firing. The other 2 men are gone, simply vanished in the blast. Another wave of attackers is coming, even larger than the first. They are almost at the lip of the gun pit. Phillips keeps firing, his face a mask of grim determination, the empty shell casings piling up around him in a brass mountain. Suddenly, the gun jams. The steady rhythm is replaced by a sickening silence. Phillips frantically works the charging handle, but it's no use. The enemy is only feet away now, their faces contorted in the flickering light of the muzzle flashes from other parts of the line. They are going to be overrun. All 15 men of his section, killed, wounded, or swallowed by the chaos. The line is broken. Basilone looks at the silent gun, at the wounded Phillips, and at the tide of enemies about to crest their position. There are no reinforcements. There is no escape. There are only 2 of them left. In that sliver of a second, as the enemy surges over the lip of the ravine, instinct and training take over. There is no time for fear, no time for despair. There is only the mission: hold the line. For John Basilone, the line is everything. With the Japanese swarming the position, he draws his Colt .45 pistol and fires, the big automatic kicking in his hand. He drops one, then another, but there are too many. He needs the Browning. He shoves Phillips aside and slams his hand against the feed mechanism of the M1917, trying to clear the stuck cartridge. His knuckles are raw, his fingers clumsy in the darkness. He can smell their sweat, hear their guttural shouts. A bayonet lunges past his head, so close he feels the wind of its passage. He clears the jam. The gun roars back to life, catching the attackers in a murderous burst at point-blank range. The wave breaks, recoiling in shock, leaving a pile of bodies tangled in the barbed wire just yards from the pit. But the gun on his left remains silent, its crew dead. Basilone knows that a single gun cannot hold this front. He makes a decision that borders on suicidal. He tells Phillips, "Keep this one firing." Then, under a hail of rifle fire and grenades, he sprints from his own gun pit toward the other disabled emplacement. The ground is a charnel house, littered with the dead and dying of both sides. He leaps into the silent pit. The crew is gone. The Browning lies on its side, its tripod leg shattered. Without hesitation, Basilone hefts the entire weapon system, the 41-pound gun, the 48-pound tripod, into his arms. It's an impossible weight, but adrenaline is a powerful fuel. He stumbles back to his own position, bullets snapping past his ears, and slams the second gun down beside the first. Now they have two, but the fight has just begun. For the next several hours, Basilone becomes a blur of motion, a one-man army serving two masters of death. He and Phillips are a desperate, efficient team. One man fires a long, sustained burst, stitching the darkness, while the other reloads, clears a jam, or pours precious water into the cooling jacket of the other gun to keep it from seizing up. The barrels begin to glow a dull cherry red in the pitch black, radiating a heat so intense it feels like a furnace. He runs between the two guns, his hands blistering, his mind focused only on the next belt of ammunition, the next target, the next wave. Imagine the scene, the deafening, continuous roar of the machine guns, the flashes of light illuminating demonic faces in the jungle, the concussive blasts of mortars shaking your teeth. You are feeding a belt of ammunition into the breach, your fingers slick with sweat and grime. You feel the heat of the barrel searing through your fatigues. You see a jam, and without thinking, you reach for the blistering hot receiver to clear it, the pain a distant secondary concern. The Japanese are relentless. They adapt their tactics, sending smaller groups to probe the flanks, trying to find a way around the curtain of fire. Grenades land all around the pit. A piece of shrapnel tears through Basilone's sleeve, slicing his arm, but he barely notices. The dead pile up in front of him, forming a grim parapet of bodies. The attackers begin to use this wall of their own fallen comrades as cover, crawling forward behind it before making their final rush. Basilone and Phillips have to depress the muzzles of their guns, firing down at the figures clambering over the mound of corpses. The night becomes a timeless, violent loop. Fire, reload, clear jam, fire again. The barrels get so hot that the water in the cooling jackets boils away in minutes, hissing into the night a steam. The guns are on the verge of melting down. And worse, far worse, he can feel the ammunition cans getting lighter. The steady supply from the rear has been cut off by the chaos. The last belt is feeding into Phillips's gun. The weight of it, the feel of it in his hands, tells him it's almost gone. The final round in the belt clicks through the receiver, and the M1917 falls silent. The sudden absence of noise is more terrifying than the roar of battle had been. In that quiet, Basilone can hear the Japanese, shouting, regrouping in the darkness just beyond the mound of their dead. They know the guns have stopped. They are preparing for the final push, the one that will finally overrun this stubborn pocket of resistance. Phillips looks at him, his face pale and streaked with gunpowder in the gloom. "Sarge, we're out." Every other man in their section is dead or gone. The riflemen who were supposed to protect their flanks have been swallowed by the night. They are an island, and the sea is about to rise. Basilone knows what he has to do. Staying here is a death sentence. The only chance, however slim, lies somewhere back in the darkness, back through the hell they just endured. "Cover me," he growls, pulling out his .45 again. It feels like a toy after handling the Brownings. Phillips nods, grabbing his M1 Garand rifle, its 8-round clip a pathetic defense against the coming storm. Then Basilone is up and out of the pit, moving low and fast, back the way they came. The journey is a nightmare descent into the heart of the battle. The American line has not just bent, it has shattered into a dozen disconnected firefights. The terrain he had crossed earlier is now crawling with Japanese soldiers who have broken through the perimeter. He is behind enemy lines, on his own soil. He moves from crater to crater, the shadows his only allies. He can hear them, moving through the undergrowth, their hushed commands in a language he doesn't understand. A flare bursts overhead, and he freezes, pressing himself into the mud, praying he looks like one of the countless corpses littering the ground. The ghastly white light passes, and he moves again. You are with him, your heart pounding in your chest. Every rustle of a leaf, every snap of a twig could be death. You stumble over a body, its limbs contorted at an unnatural angle, and have to stifle a cry. You smell the cloying, sweet scent of blood. Ahead, you see the silhouettes of two soldiers, and for a terrifying moment, you don't know if they are friend or foe. They pass, and you breathe again. This isn't a run of a few hundred yards. It's a journey across a landscape of pure terror, where every step could be your last. His goal is the battalion supply point, a position that seems a million miles away. He finally reaches a command post, a frantic hub of activity where wounded are being tended to and officers are desperately trying to make sense of the chaos. He finds a supply sergeant. "I need .30 caliber, now," he barks, his voice hoarse. The sergeant, seeing the wild look in Bazilone's eyes and the state of his uniform, doesn't argue. He points to a stack of green ammunition cans. Bazilone doesn't just grab a few belts. He loads himself down like a pack mule, draping heavy belts of ammunition over his shoulders, tucking cans under his arms, until he can barely stand. He is carrying nearly 100 pounds of pure firepower, and now he has to make the entire treacherous journey back. The return trip is even more harrowing. He is slow, weighed down by the ammunition, an easy target. But his burden is also his purpose. Every ounce of weight is another few seconds of life for his position, another chance to hold the line. He moves with a singular, desperate focus. He can hear the firing from his gun pit has become sporadic. Phillips is holding on with just his rifle. He's running out of time. Bazilone pushes himself harder, his lungs burning, his wounded arm throbbing with every step. As he gets closer, he hears it. The sound is rising again. That terrible, chilling cry. Banzai! A new wave is coming, the biggest one yet. He crashes back into the gun pit, dropping the ammunition cans to the muddy floor, just as the jungle once again erupts with the screams of hundreds of charging men. The return of John Bazilone is like a resurrection. He and Phillips work with a desperate, silent understanding, their movements economical and precise. They rip open the ammo cans, the metallic scrape of the lid echoing in the brief lull. Bazilone slams a fresh 250-round belt into the first Browning, pulls the charging handle twice, and sends a stream of lead back into the darkness. The gun, which had seemed on the verge of catastrophic failure, answers the call. Phillips gets the second gun loaded and firing moments later. The two-gun fortress is back in business, and not a moment too soon. This next assault is born of pure desperation. The Japanese commanders, seeing the night slip away, throw everything they have left at the Marine line. They come not in waves, but in a single, massive flood. They charge directly into the interlocking fields of fire from the two Brownings. The slaughter is unimaginable. The machine guns, now properly supplied, do not stop firing for more than a few seconds at a time. They become extensions of the two men operating them, instruments of a terrible, necessary violence. The barrels glow from dull red to a bright, angry orange. The water in the cooling jackets vaporizes instantly, shrouding the gun pit in a thick cloud of steam. Through this fog, Bazilone and Phillips fire, their faces illuminated by the constant muzzle flashes, making them look like demons guarding the gates of hell. When the enemy gets too close, climbing over the now mountain-high pile of their own dead, Bazilone drops the spade grips of the Browning and uses his .45, firing into the faces of men just feet away. At one point, a Japanese soldier manages to get on top of the sandbags, his bayonet descending toward Phillips. Bazilone, his pistol empty, grabs a machete from his belt and brings it down in a vicious arc. The fight is no longer at a distance. It is intimate, brutal, and measured in inches. For what feels like an eternity, this is their world. The shriek of Banzai, the roar of the guns, the heat, the steam, the smell of gunpowder and death. They lose all track of time. There is no past, no future, only the next belt, the next target. Then, slowly, imperceptibly at first, something changes. The pressure lessens. The screams become more scattered, less unified. The tide of the assault is finally breaking. Through the thinning ranks of the attackers, Battalion sees the first hint of gray on the eastern horizon. Dawn is coming. The night, which had seemed endless, is finally dying. As the tropical sun climbs into the sky, it burns away the shadows and reveals the full, staggering reality of what has transpired. The sight is apocalyptic. The ground in front of their position is not just littered with the dead, it is a solid carpet of them. For 100 yards, the earth is invisible beneath the bodies of Japanese soldiers, piled 3 and 4 deep in some places. They lie tangled in the wire, draped over the mound of their comrades, their silent faces turned toward the sky. The jungle, which had been so full of terrifying life, is now profoundly, shockingly still. Smoke and steam drift lazily from the 2 machine guns. Empty shell casings lie in a brass drift that reaches their knees. And in the middle of it all, 2 American Marines, John Battalion and Nash Phillips. They are caked in mud and blood, their uniforms shredded, their hands burned black, their faces hollowed out by exhaustion. But they are alive. They have held the line. The charge of 300 has been broken by 2. As reinforcements finally arrive, they can only stare in stunned silence at the field of ghosts and at the 2 men who had refused to yield the night.